was just very much like they did not give a shit about me. And they're like, no, you're leaving next week. And then the one partner said, I'm doing this for your health. And I just went, okay, you guys have like 5 seconds. And I'm like 4. And I'm just like slamming the table being like 3. And that's like, it was like years. I'm just feeling like no one's listening to me. And I just went like, fuck you, goodbye.
That is Tiffany DaSilva. She's one of the best SEO and PPC consultants in the world. Over 19 years of experience, 500 different websites she's worked on, 80 different startups that she's supported. She's on the international speaker circuit. She runs educational programs with McMaster University and with Grow Class. She's been featured in Mashable and USA Today. I could go on and on. I'm just giving you the cliff notes. If you're new here, my name is Andrew Kaplan, and this is a show where I get to have candid conversations with my guests about some of the toughest moments that almost derailed their careers and instead became part of their success story. So in my conversation with Tiffany, we're going to cover a bunch of hers. I'm not going to give away the lead because she talked about a ton of different things in this episode I think you're going to love. Let's go ahead and jump right in.
So I was born in Canada, but moved to New Hampshire when I was 7 years old. It was one of those things where I was by myself with the internet and I started to create websites. But I wasn't really into the creation of a website. And I'm like aging myself here. So imagine the days of Lycos and Alta Vista. And,
we talking GeoCities?
Yeah, GeoCities. Oh, I had that. But I would create that. And I didn't really care about the website. I mostly cared about finding the website. And so I would play games in like finding a way of doing like, will they find Tiffany DaSilva? Will they find that and find my website? Will they find the most awesome girl in the world? And it would lead to a page that said like Tiffany DaSilva. So it was always these kind of games that I play, but never knowing at all that this was the way that like this could be a job. And so I never told anyone that I did this. I kind of talked to people on IRC back in the day. Went to high school, went into communications degree, couldn't really figure out what I wanted to do. Got a job. I knew I wanted to have something to do with the internet. Got a job as a secretary at a web design development company because I figured that was the closest I was ever going to get to like the internet. And no one would give me a chance. Like I'm talking no one. And one day I was sitting there, the guys were talking about this poker site and it was all guys in the loft and they're all around the designer and they're talking about how to rank the site. And I'm listening to them going like, guys, I think I used to do this when I was a kid. I think I did this. And they're like, hey, Tiff, like whatever. And I'm like, guys, like, no, I did it. I had a courageous, brave moment where I just went like, guys, no, I know what this is. You got to put the word here and this, and you got to put this here. And I just like went on a whole monologue of all the optimizations things you do. And then they turn around right after like, oh, you know SEO? And I was like, I don't know what that is. And so the designer heard, and thank God for him, the designer heard at the time and went like, you got to get out of here. You should not be here. And so he actually went out and got me an interview at another company that had about 100 to 300 websites in-house. And it was what they called arbitrage. And I basically got a job as my first job as a SEO link developer. And my career kind of started from there.
Oh, super cool. And then you're off to the races. And so, I want to double click on some of the speed bumps. And so one of the things that I hear about a lot from guests are some of the low points in their journey. And I guess I'm curious to know if you're comfortable sharing what's a low point from yours, maybe in the early part of your career, if there's one that resonates there.
Yeah. So it kind of happened a little bit further. So I was in this agency. I moved on to some startups and then I ended up getting into a unicorn startup. They brought me out to dinner. They wined and dined me. They told me all about how I was like the perfect candidate. So I was feeling really good about myself.
And just for context, if we were to look at your LinkedIn profile, are we going to see one of the companies here? I'm not going to force you to say the name if you don't want to.
Yes, you could find it. And so at the time, the job was head of conversion rate optimization and CRO was about 5 minutes old. And they had told me, don't worry, you're going to figure it out. It's going to be awesome. Like you have the brain for it and have like, obviously you've been able to jump and do all these different things, SEO, PPC. This is exactly where you get to be. And I had already started to write and kind of get in that world by writing about the psychology of websites and stuff. So I was almost there. And
hold on, before we get into this, help contextualize it for us. So you're at a unicorn. How big is it at the time that you joined?
80 people in the city, but I think there might have been a couple hundred altogether, but like we had just opened up the office here in Toronto. And so, I mean, there's so many groups already formed there because they would buy companies and then, they would have the groups. And so I do not do well as someone who had to jump around and move around a lot. I did not do well, and it takes me a really long time to kind of open up. And the company before this, I loved more than anything, but I knew I had to jump just because I had to learn something new and it was too easy. And I knew that things can't always be comfortable. And so it was really hard to make this jump. So I'm sitting there and it's like the first couple of weeks, I start looking around going like, oh, I think I might've made a mistake. And this happened instantly because I didn't have a team. I didn't really have a job. It was so new that no one had really thought it through. I didn't really have a manager. I was just kind of sitting in a chair, didn't have even a website to look at because everyone owns stuff. So I would have to actually come in and force my way through and say I wanted to do these changes. And people were very like, it was a competitive environment, right? I knew nothing about this kind of culture coming in.
So culturally, all the stuff that you wanted to do and how you wanted to go about doing it was going upstream, basically.
Oh, yeah. So I realized, months are starting to go by. I'm not really getting any wins under my back. I'm starting to kind of see managers in the hallway being like, I thought you would be better at this.
No, people did not say that.
Yeah, just in passing. I thought we would have got a win by now. I thought we would, because it was that kind of world that it was like, and people were winning all around me, and people were very open about when they won stuff. So you were just in this kind of space. And normally, I think about it now, there's so many things I probably would have done at the experience I have now and the confidence, but I did not have that confidence going in. And so about 9 months in, so it's like 9 months at this point, I've gone 4 days where I haven't slept at all. And I knew I just had to get out of it. And I can tell that story a little bit later, but I think I went into a space, I didn't ask sometimes the right questions, and I blamed myself the whole way through that I wasn't good enough. I kept telling that to myself. And now when I look back, I think about like, if I would have had that job, the first thing I would have done with the confidence I have now in not having a team, not having anything, it would be like, I'd start writing every agency out there that did that and say, you guys want to compete against each other? I don't have a big budget, but let's see what you can do. And I would have had them all like, kind of fighting it out. But that took 10 more years of owning my own business, kind of understanding. And I think like, had I been an entrepreneur coming in, I would have thought differently and been probably the right person for the job. But I had been in a job where very structured and stuff. So yeah, sometimes it's not the right time for you. And you learn that going in.
I think this happens a lot to people who get put in stretch roles. And so it's like you have done a thing in the past. Now you're excited. You're excited to take this big leap. You get this next job. Maybe it's a title you're really excited about, or maybe the title's the same, but the ownership or accountability is much larger. But you show up wide-eyed and you don't know what you don't know. And those are when the big mistakes happen, because usually there are, in retrospect, red flags or lack of alignment or lack of clarity and all these things that would stop you today, or at least pause you today. You don't even know to look for. You're like, oh, this is my shot. This is my thing. I'll figure it out. This doesn't seem like a big deal. Let me just get in there. And then what really happens is you go too fast and then something like this happens. And so it sounds like this is a flavor of what kind of you went through.
Absolutely. And I ended up getting a team, not to say they left me all alone forever. I did end up getting a team probably 6 months in, but by then my confidence was shattered. So I couldn't manage. I couldn't really think outside of my own brain. And so I think like sometimes timing matters, all this stuff matters. And one thing I realized about being in-house is having that support around you is so important. Because if I had just, some of the people that I had when I started my own business around me to help, I think it would have been a much different story. And I have like 1 or 2 people that, I came out of there that are still friends today, and they've been amazing. But at the time, I was too scared to even let them in.
And did you let anyone in? Like, did you tell your boss? Did you tell any peers? Like, sometimes the hard part is when you feel like you're alone. Like, did you bring anyone into that world?
Not at the time. To the detriment of my health, my mental health and everything, because I would just hold it in. And I would try to have meetings with my boss and not tell them the emotion, because it just seemed like especially after that personality test where it showed like I have like super high EQ, but like this is not the place for it. So I would try to come in almost like a different personality, trying to be logical and trying to like almost give me some kind of structure. And I was not speaking the same language or asking the right questions ever. And I didn't know how to ask. And I think that it made it worse. So it would be like, when they asked, like, you can like, if you want to have another meeting, we could talk about it. I just be like, no, what, forget it. Because I wanted to show up at the meeting with something, but I still didn't know what to bring. So it was so hard. And I found that other people started in the company and later on, like even 5-6 years later, and they were exactly the same way where they got kind of thrown in and for maybe 6 months to a year didn't know what they were doing, but then eventually found their spot. And for me, I think it was just the acceleration of how my career had gone so far. I wasn't going to allow myself a year of not knowing what to do because I had been kind of ahead. It's like kind of jumping into a small fish in a big pond where I was used to being the big fish in a small pond.
This episode of the show is brought to you by Navattic. In fall of 2024, Navattic just launched their free plan, which allows product-led SaaS businesses like yours to publish and share interactive demos. So I was super excited to have Natalie, who's their head of growth, come back on the show. She's been on before to tell us all about the decisions that happened to enable the freemium launch. Because after being sales-led for 3 years, there were a ton of details to detangle, and we explored them all. Why freemium versus free trial, how this fits into Navattic's strategy, how they were able to get sales and customer success on the same page, their rollout plan, and of course, the KPIs they're using to track success. Subscribers to the show will remember that back in May, I actually published an 8-part interview series with Natalie and her colleague Raman from the Navattic growth team. And in that series, we talked about if freemium might be a part of Navattic's future. At the time, it was still in the idea phase. So this was a major update. In the conversation, we covered a ton of ground. It's going to be interesting and educational for anyone thinking about launching freemium or anyone who's already running a freemium program today that wants to see under the hood of another business. Catch our entire conversation either on my YouTube channel, just look for the behind the scenes playlist on my main page, or by searching for behind the scenes on any of the major podcast platforms under the Delivering Value podcast umbrella. I hope you enjoy. This episode of the show is presented by Appcues. If you work in product-led growth, you know how important activating and engaging new accounts is. Turning those new accounts into active users is critical to your success in a product-led environment, and it's typically why activated accounts is a North Star metric for many growth teams. Certainly why my team spent years working on our onboarding experience when I was in-house, both at Wistia and at Postscript, and that's why I'm so excited that they're sponsoring the show. They are just as passionate about helping the product-led community and companies fix their onboarding and retention as I am. They are the leading product onboarding and adoption platform for both web and for mobile apps, and they've created tons of resources to help this community. They've got the Product Adoption Academy, which is where you can get a free masterclass, like think courses, templates, examples, all the good stuff to help you break through your current plateaus and level up your product chops. I've got a course in there. It's my Value First onboarding course where I share the exact playbooks that my team used to help us onboard hundreds of thousands of new users. You can check out my course at appcues.com/value. That's appcues.com/value. And you can follow that link and explore all the different programs they've got inside of the Product Adoption Academy. You know, it's really interesting. A lot of people who've never worked at a unicorn think, gosh, it's got to be easier there. I'm at this little company and I'm scrapping it out and there's no opportunities and I got to go to a bigger pond. But then the reality is when you go to a bigger pond, in my experience, I mean, I worked at HubSpot, which I would consider a unicorn during those early magic days. And it's almost harder because things are changing so much. Even if you had the clarity on day one, you're probably not going to have it at the 6-month mark. Your job is going to be totally different a year from then. And so thriving in that ambiguity is hard and uncomfortable and really not for anyone. Like it's really hard to survive in those environments and not feel the lack of sleep and all that stuff. So just to normalize it a little bit for folks out there. And so if you could go back in time, what do you think you would listen for? Like what were the 1 or 2 things that if you were giving advice to your former self and you were going to re-interview for this job, what would be the 1 or 2 red flags that you might listen for differently today that you weren't tuned into at that time?
Yeah, I think when I ask, what does day one look like for me? Asking that question and then listening. Don't just ask it, ask it to listen. Like, is there a team set up? Like, am I a 1-person individual contributor? If so, what am I touching? Do I have a space for me? And if it was vague, which there was a lot of vague answers, but at the time I was used to vague, but I was used to once I jump in, there'd be structure, but really just digging in. I think, and now, you know, as someone who owns my own business, and if people are being vague to me now, I'm like, okay, wait, let's go back. Can we go back to that? And being able to ask the question 3 different times, 3 different ways, and having the confidence to do so. I think that just takes time. But I would have loved to be that person that just went, okay, I know you said that before, but, you know, I'm going to ask again. Then what does this look like? And, you know, what kind of budget? Do I have a budget? Because I never thought to ask that even because I just wasn't ahead of my career enough to know that you could maybe have a budget and you could up. Yeah.
Right. And that asking about it would be appropriate and totally okay.
Yeah. Yeah. We all want to make those leaps sometimes up the ladder, but sometimes knowing someone up there to kind of tell you what you need to know is really important. And luckily I found those people later on, but I didn't have that then.
Yeah. And so what's your advice to somebody listening to this? They're working at, on paper, which should be their dream job. They're at some unicorn. They love telling their friends that they work there, but they hate actually being there. What would be your advice to someone who's going through it right now?
It's the same advice or the same thing I could tell to the people who are in different unicorn companies around North America that come to me. I say it's so much better outside of it. That same admiration that you get, which is all you really want for being part of it, you can still use for the next 5 years of your life. And to be honest, like as someone who was there for only 9 months, you can ride that pretty hard a while and it's okay. Now I don't need it. Like I don't need that crutch anymore. So it doesn't matter. But at the time I needed the crutch and I used it. And that could be all that it was. It could just be a logo. And that's all it was meant to be. And I think being able to tell yourself that is important because it doesn't have to take away, make you feel sick. It doesn't have to do all these things that it could be doing right now. It could just be the logo on a resume.
And when you were there, it sounded like most of the pressure and most of the lack of sleep and all that stuff was self-imposed. Is that fair? Or was there any external feedback that amped things up for you?
I think, yeah, there was. I mean, I had external feedback from other places that were more terrible, but I think it was the lack of. I think it was if I asked for help and I didn't get it, I would just, instead of asking deeper or being upset with them for not giving me, because now I would just be like, listen, how am I supposed to do my job if I don't get this kind of feedback? I would say that now. I wasn't saying then. And so I think like that's a little bit of a difference between now and then.
So let's double click on the feedback theme. So you started to say, hey, I've had other feedback that was much more difficult. What's a piece of feedback that you received that when you reflect on it felt pretty painful in the moment?
Oh man, I was told by someone who was doing what I wanted to do that I would never be a successful entrepreneur. I would never be successful at owning my own business. I didn't have what it took. And what I say to people, and every time someone comes to me with like feedback they heard from a manager or something that just doesn't feel right, you know when you hear a piece of feedback, whether it feels good inside, like sometimes it's true. Like sometimes you're like, oh, that didn't feel good, but I get it. Like I know my gut says I have to make that change. And you just need, maybe it wasn't the way that someone said it, that I just need to maybe process how that works in my head. But sometimes it's just wrong. And it's coming from a person who has certain intentions that they don't want to work up against. Like they don't want to work against you. They don't want you in the space with them. Maybe they want to push you down. And I always think when someone gives me feedback, are they just trying to tear me down or are they trying to lift me up here? And all the feedback I try to give to people is to eventually lift them up. I'm like, this is going to hurt right now. And I'll always preface it by this is going to hurt right now. But trust me when I say, like, I really believe that you can get here where you want to get, that this is how to do it. I think that's a way of starting feedback that could be hurtful and damaging to the ego. But this was just, I just don't think you're good at it. And I'm like, well, is there something I need to work on? Is there something they think? No, I think some people have it and some people don't. And like, I remember going.
Well, what was the context? Were you sharing your dreams of starting your own business or was this unprompted? Like, how did you get to the point where you're getting this feedback?
Oh, it was worse. I was actually starting to get seizures. And I had been through that unicorn startup and kind of jumping into a job after. I almost died in my sleep from being so stressed and holding it all in that my parents, luckily I'm staying over my parents for a long weekend. They come into the room and I've turned blue. I had died for a couple of seconds and my dad had to bring me back to life. And during that month, everything that I was thinking I was saying would come out a different word. And when your whole job has to do with your brain, there's nothing scarier than about like when you realize you're about to lose it. The job that I had, they kept calling and asking when I was going to come back to work. And my mom would be like, she can't speak. Like she just know what she's saying. And like my parents were having to answer my emails because it looked like gibberish. And so when I got in, I started having conversation, try to be open of the fact that I don't know if I'm going to be able to work at the same capacity. I think I need to move to 4 days. I think we just need to go into this slowly. Or, I may have to kind of just leave. I don't know if this is the right place for me. And then that's where he went, well, if you're thinking of starting your own business, I don't think that you're the right person. I don't think you have the personality for it. If you can't handle this. And I'm so glad that as soon as I heard that, I immediately went, okay, if I were to do that, like this person's obviously not someone who's going to support me through it. So they're out, like they're not part of this, but who are the people that I know that will have done this successfully and can help me? And at that point, probably a year before, I gone to a conference and I had met up with Joanna Lieb, who at that point, she was like copy hacker. She was just like, I was absolutely obsessed with her. And I'm not good with small talk. I go right in the beat. So she's sitting next to me at a conference speaker and I turn around and look at her and like, she's like, how are you? Like, where are you from? And I go, I'm sitting around here. Do you ever feel like you're an imposter? Like you shouldn't be here? And I realized, I'm like, oh my God, you're talking to Joanna Lee, shut up. And we just started having this conversation about, what being a woman in tech is like and like kind of some of the struggles that I was facing at that startup that I was at. And she went, we talked about this podcast that we had heard where someone had said this kind of shine theory that, you want people that are all around you that basically believe in one thing. If you don't shine, I don't shine. And so I said, well, let's create a shine crew. And it happened to be that there was like 4 women around and we kind of just built this shine crew. And the whole idea was that we were going to be there to be each other's hype person. And we didn't need to care about ourselves because the other people had our backs. And so that started then. And so when I kind of had this conversation, and normally if this were the unicorn startup, I'd be all by myself and I'd just hold it all in. But I need to be told them what had happened. And they all would, no. This is what you're going to do. This is how it's going to happen. And I will say, I left that place, middle finger in the air, fast. Felt like my dad had sent me a text message that morning that said, don't burn bridges. I burned it down. Like everything else.
What does that mean? What do you mean you burned? Did you send like a fuck you email or something on the way out?
I had basically gone into a meeting I had told them before that I think I was going to leave and they had said, give us 2 months. And so I said, okay, sounds good. So I gave 2 months. A week later, they sat me down and started having a transition meeting with me saying that I was leaving next week. And I was like, whoa. And it was to, again, put me in a bad place where I was starting the business like already behind. And it was so I wouldn't be able to like take anything. And it was just very much like they did not give a shit about me. And so I said, like, in the middle of the meeting, like one partner knew, the other one didn't. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to pretend that this just didn't just happen. And I'm going to go back to my seat and we're going to pretend like the 2 months are going to happen. And they're like, no, you're leaving next week. And then the one partner said, I'm doing this for your health. And I just went, okay, you guys have like 5 seconds. And I'm like 4. And I'm just like slamming the table being like 3. And that's like, it was like years. I'm just feeling like no one's listening to me. No one, it's all that finally came up. And they were unfortunately the audience to that rage. And it was a glass room. So everyone around, I was the manager in place. So like everyone is just watching. And I just went like, fuck you, goodbye.
It's like the Office Space moment. Yeah.
So that's exactly what I thought. But in the strangest way, and I shit you not, this is real. I was walking down the stairs. Tears hadn't even been able to form yet because I just realized what I had just done. I get a call, and it was from that first company that I got where I was working in the 350 website. And it was one of the VPs. And he said, hey, I know this is like out of nowhere, but I was a VP of this company that, used to work for. I remember that you were awesome at PPC. We're having a PPC problem. Do you consult? And I just went like, yeah.
It is literally on the way,
the way down the stairs. I hadn't even gotten outside yet. So I'm like, I can go right now. And he's like, okay, oh my God, that'd be great. And so I show up. I kind of help him with the problem. It was pretty easy problem solved.
Wait, this is like you literally show up the same day? Or are we talking like you show up like a couple days, a week or 2?
I went right from there to there. And I was still like, shaking. And so at that point, he asked me, how you doing? Like after we kind of fixed it. And I went like, I have to tell someone. And this is, again, the difference between who I was then versus who I was at the unicorn, where I'm like, this is a VP. This is a guy who could probably help me and who's been here. Let me ask. And so I was like, this is just what just happened. And he goes, oh my God, how many clients do you need? Seriously, how many clients? And he's like, I invest. I'm an investor. Like, what do you need? And I go, I need 3 clients. And he's like, okay, like I'll make your calls. And that day I had my first 3 clients. It has never stopped. I've never not hit grids. And so I felt like it was meant to happen. And it was like, if that's the type of reputation that I created for myself, then I absolutely was meant to do this. And this was all working up to that.
Yeah, the universe was listening. So there's this Johnny Depp quote that I like. I think it's a Johnny Depp quote where he says something like, someone's interviewing him and they're like, what motivates you to keep going? Like, why are you still making stuff? You don't really need the money, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, look, growing up, people doubted me and they said I wasn't good and that I'd never make it and that I'd never amount to anything. And I was an idiot for even trying. And those are the people that motivate me to keep going. I want to become so successful that those people brag to their friends that they used to even know me. And so that makes me think of what you're talking about here, where you have this thing that motivates you immensely. It's like this catapult moment into this next version of yourself. And that's pretty damn cool.
For the first year or so, rage and spite is what propelled me. Because it was like every time I went up against that company, where I made sure I undercut them. I knew exactly what their price would be and I undercut them. But I did all the terrible, businessy things that people do. But now I've created a business that I am really proud of. And now my whole thing is just to make sure that I have something, like leave a legacy behind and I can help other people that are coming up. So it changes. Like your motivations definitely change.
And what's nice, what I heard you also say is that you had the support of the Shine Crew, which as a side note, I've had, I think 5 or 6 women from the Shine Crew on the show. And I think I've heard this story, but maybe from a different lens, maybe from Gia, I think maybe was there, or if it wasn't Gia. So it's like, it's cool to hear from all the different angles. So how does someone decide? One of the things that you mentioned I thought was really interesting is deciding when feedback serves you or not. And that's something that's been hard for me in my career. If there's someone listening to this who's gotten some feedback that's hard to hear, the details will be different than the story that you just shared, but maybe still painful in a similar way. What would be your advice to them? How do they break through what feedback is worth listening and listening carefully versus those that they should let go?
Write it down on a Post-it and look at it from far away and say, like, does this make sense? Do I have to change this? Yes or no? And sometimes, like, when it's inside your head, it feels different. If it has a different shape, it has like a thing attached. But if I were to look at it on a piece of paper in front of me and I can go, okay, like I probably do need to be a certain way at a meeting or be more professional in this situation. And then from there, you can go, okay, these are all the different ways that I think I can do that. But if you're going to get that kind of feedback from someone and they're like, go back and say, I thought about what you said. This is what I took from it. And this is what I want to change. Does that make sense based on what you said? Because you sometimes may internalize something in a different way than they intended. So if someone was like, the other day, like I used to get this a lot, you don't speak professionally enough about what you do. And so I thought that meant I had to add a ton of technical jargon because I learned this as a kid, I didn't have all the technical jargon. I've never really spoken using that. Not to say I don't know it, I just don't want to. And so I went back and used this feedback and started speaking in jargon. And she goes, whoa, what was that? And I go, I thought that's what you wanted. And she's like, no. Just like be a little bit more confident when you speak. Like look people in the eye, like show up, like don't just show up in like, your sweatshirt, whatever. If it's an important meeting, like show up, dress up, like stand up if you need to. Like that's what I'm talking about. I'm like, oh, that's a completely different feedback than what I thought. I thought I had to like be a different person. And those are little things that I could do. So I think like being able to take feedback and then figure it out. And that being said, don't be scared of feedback. Be proactive with clients. Like it's January. So every client that I talk to right now, I go, listen, like we're starting a new year. Tell me, is there anything that I could be doing differently? And is there anything that you need that you haven't been able to get from me? Don't be afraid to ask that every couple months. And like, if I find that if I'm proactive and they know that, then they're not waiting for effort to give me this like terrible feedback. There's always open communication and like, it's less scary that way. So the first time asking someone, it's sometimes hard. So you could ask different ways, but is there anything more I could be doing? And that's a nice way of doing it without, do I have to change my whole persona? Or is there anything that you need that I haven't given you at this point? I think those are ways to just get actionable feedback that you can implement right away. It could be like a summary that you should be giving, or it could be certain meeting notes that they need. It's something small that would literally change that person's perspective of you. And it might be easy.
Yeah, it's great feedback. I've learned that in my own journey. It's like when you can be proactive and you're the one asking for feedback, it always feels like a paper cut. And when you're caught off guard and it hasn't come, or like what you shared earlier, where you get no feedback and then finally you get this like waterfall of feedback one day and it catches you totally off guard, that's where it can really fuck with you a little bit. And the other thing that you shared here, I wanted to double click on before we move off of this, is you said sometimes when people give you feedback, it says more about them than it does about you. Is there a question or like an affirmation or something that people can keep in mind as they hear feedback and they try to detangle like what the fuck is going on to see like, is this something going on in this person's life versus something that really I need to do differently?
If someone says something to you and instantly stings, be like, can you give me an example? And I think if someone is just having a bad day, or let me preface that by sometimes I'll get feedback that's a little bit rough. I'll make them know it's rough. So I'll go, oof, can you give me an example of that? And it's just that little like, so they know that maybe the way that they said it wasn't the right way, or maybe there was something there. So by putting that forward, that person can go, oh, I didn't mean it like that. Let me better explain. Let me give you context. And so I think that's a way of drilling deeper into the feedback. So you're not just letting someone give you something and then you're just walking away with it.
Yeah. Have you ever worked with a professional coach?
Yes.
This is one that when I started working with a coach, she had me like tattoo this on my brain where she would always say, clarify and verify. It's like someone says something. Hey, I heard you say this. I just want to make sure I heard it right. This is what I heard you say. Now I'm thinking that this is what this means. Am I right here or am I off? And I basically heard you share a version of that over the last 5 minutes. So I was wondering where that came from. If you learned it from a coach or if you read it or if it's just intuitive.
That's been always like, it's been intuitive from like the trauma of dealing with stuff and also being able.
Right. It's a good teacher, that stuff.
Yeah. And also owning your own business means you get to make your own rules. And I promised myself when I started my business that it would be a business that I wanted.
Oh, I love that rule.
I would never like, sometimes I'll, be with a client or have like a certain situation where I'm like, why am I doing this? I don't need to be doing it. It's my company. I'm allowed to make that rule. Or if a client comes to me and says like, I don't like that you do that. And it's like, well, there's lots of other companies that don't. And I think like being able to say, this is the company I want to make, I think that helps. And so once I started doing that, then I needed to clarify to make sure, is this client right for me? And not being scared if they needed to walk away, because I knew it would be problems later if we just didn't match. Because I would never get in a situation where a culture fit was going to make me have sleepless nights, because that wasn't the business that I was going to create.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying this episode of the show. If you are, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening on. The data shows something like 40% of the people who listen to the show are actually subscribed. It is the best way for you to support the show, and it helps the algorithm find other listeners who are just like you. If you're feeling generous, a quick rating or review makes a huge difference as well. Thank you so much for listening and for your support. Now let's get back to this episode. Shifting gears a little bit, one of the things that I'll hear a lot from my clients is they'll be looking for perspective on how to navigate some challenging situation. Situations are always different, but they're trying to get out of their own head and detangle like what the heck is going on. So I'm curious for you, as you reflect back on some of the experiences that you have, what's a challenging moment that took you a while to process?
When I was in that first company, 100 of us got laid off at once. And then for the next year, I kept writing them every single month until I could get back in the company. And so I would ask them if there's any openings or whatever. So finally they give me an interview. I get in there and then they go, okay, we have an SEO job for you. And I'm like, I don't want an SEO job. All those people got laid off. I don't want to put myself at risk. I want to do this PPC job because none of them lost their job. And so they're just like, at this point, they were so annoyed with me and like, just, and they're like, okay, whatever, like just go in there. And then I think they thought they were just going to eventually, if I didn't cut it, they would just let me go. And then it would be like, she's done with us, it's fine. So I get in the job. And even though it wasn't SEO, which is what I really wanted to do, I knew that it was better to diversify my skills at the time. So I was going to kind of eat it for a little bit. But the situation that it was we each got 30 websites in our portfolio every 3 months. And it was back in the early days of when things were a little bit more Wild West. Our job was to bring people in through Google Ads and then have them stay in these informational sites with Yahoo ads on there, and we would make money based on the difference of the clicks.
Oh, it was like a little arbitrage kind of thing? Yeah, cool.
And so that was our job. And it was very fast paced. Every couple months, your portfolio would completely change. You were competing with everyone around you for commission. And you would even as you got the new portfolio, if you knew there's a switch, you would even undo some of your changes so that they couldn't really see your strategy and stuff. So
what do you mean? Like for your peers, like your colleagues?
yeah, because you kind of and you were always trying to learn what other people were doing. And it was unlimited budget. So it was the best place to play and learn. And so we used to have this leaderboard. And every day we would come in and there was one of us bought a championship belts and whoever was on the top of the leaderboard.
What was the leaderboard for? Was it for conversions or dollars generated?
Who made the most money, the day, because we would always know kind of how much money our sites were making every day. And so I was on the top of this leaderboard for month and month and month and month and month. And it was just like we always make a joke that the belt was actually collecting dust. And sometimes I would come in and like dust off the belt.
So you were swagging a little bit.
Yeah, of course. And it was really friendly competition. And me and the guy that were 1 and 2, like we got along so well. And so like there was never any kind of issue between us. One day he ends up getting number 1. And it was like weirdly just for that day, it was like this odd thing that happened with my site. He gets number 1 and he makes a big deal out of it. And it's like a big show and we're all laughing. Like we all think this is like the funniest thing. He's bringing the out, he puts on music. It's like a whole like hilarious, the whole company kind of stops. And then he gets a call from the manager. Manager tells him to come in. And we thought he was getting in trouble for being so loud and whatever. So he goes in, comes back out, and he's like white. And he goes, "I'm so sorry, Tiff." And I'm like, okay. And the manager comes out and he goes, "Oh, I have this amazing news to share. You know, this guy's going to be the new manager. He did so well that we're going to give him the manager of like everyone." And I just like looked at it and went like, what? How does this make sense? And at the time, like me and him were exactly the same in terms of the way that we approach things. We were both helping people that came in. We were training, we were doing all this stuff. So like we hit all the same kind of markers. So if there was a marker that would make us different, it was that I was making more money, which I thought was the important thing. And he knew that it wasn't fair. I knew it wasn't fair. And it was just like, I knew, like, it was that moment where you're like, I got to put my ego forward. But I went like, I can't be in a situation like this. This doesn't feel good. And so I immediately went to the guy, well, I don't know if I can stay here. Like why would you do this? Like I knew it was going to ruin the whole thing.
You went to your colleague or the manager?
Yeah, the manager. And me and the colleague were talking, going, like, this isn't going to feel right. He goes, "I don't want to manage you. Like, this is so dumb." And so the manager just said like, too bad. Like, doesn't matter. And so as I started thinking like, okay, I'm going to quit, a manager that was a couple rows down kind of saw what was going on. And he's like, "What just happened?" And I told him, he's like, "Okay, well, don't quit. Come work for me." And so I went and started working with him. And he was doing basically Google news hacking. So I would be writing, it's a completely different job, writing for a celebrity gossip site every day, 12 to 15 articles a day, getting hundreds of thousands of views. I would make money that way. So it was a different skill. And in my head, I was like, I'm learning a different skill. It's a little bit closer to SEO. It's SEO writing. Maybe this is a time to move. But some of the guys were kind of like, I was saying, maybe I need an MBA, maybe I need something to kind of show the difference as I was like moving. One of the guys said like, "You can get a manager's job." And so I heard that. I know. And it was like, this was a tough world. Like people in the internet world back then, it was like, and being a woman in it was not a good place to be. I mean, strip clubs over lunch for meetings. Like I'm talking this was a terrible like situation to kind of be in. And so I just said, I kind of sat down, figured out what my new job is. That night, I started looking up MBAs, tried to figure out which ones I could go after that didn't require a GMAT because I'm not good with tests. And then called everyone that Monday morning, told them I was going to be late for that job, called up a university in Norwich University in Vermont, asked her what I needed, basically gave her everything before noon. I applied for it, got all the recommendations, got all my stuff that I needed, went into work at noon and said I applied for an MBA. And then that day, the woman called me and said, "I'd never seen someone do this at such a, like, you're awesome." And she's like, "I'm pushing you through. Like, just so you know, like, I'm going to make sure this happens for you. So you're as good as in." And so I turned around to the guys and said, like, "Looks like I'm getting an MBA," and like sent the email around. And so I just let that moment push me. But I'm not saying that's a good thing because, you know, years later, I end up like getting secrets from like, you know, kind of pushing down this kind of stuff. But in the moment, I had to do something. I had to put something in action. And I knew that I couldn't sit there and let something like that happen. And my way of processing it was a little bit different than most, I think.
What do you think in retrospect? What was going on there? Like, was that performance thing today as you think about it? Is it exactly the way that it sounded to me? Or is it different?
To be honest, I think it was. I mean, he was the guy's guy. He was going out to drinks with them. He was getting invited to all the things. And I think that the directors thought, like, we can't bring a woman around to our things that we do. We can't bring her up to these meetings when it's just her. And I think that that had a lot to do with it because of the way that the company was structured. So there just wasn't room in the table. there. And like, not to take anything from him, he was awesome. Like I still think he's one of the best marketers I've ever met. It had nothing to kind of do with it. It was just that moment where I knew that things weren't going to be fair. And I needed to figure out how I was going to level up. Because also one of the things about moving 2 rows down meant that I was getting cut out of the commission. And so I was going to be making less. And so I needed to figure out what I was going to do to level up. And the leveling up that I could see was being able to sit in front of someone in Toronto, which is my next step would be go to a Toronto startup and just say like, I have an MBA. And I've only had to use it a few times when, it's usually when someone goes, oh, well, I have a master's. So I'm like, me too. Where'd you get yours from? So it's really just, but I knew that I needed it if I was going to stand out in the world that I was in.
How does this moment change the rest of your journey or your journey from that point forward?
That moment, I think when I got the MBA a year and a half later and looked back and knowing that that's the moment that started it all, I said like, I can do anything, because I'm the first person that not only got an MBA, but I was like the first person that graduated high school for my parents. Like I was the first person that got college or university. I'm the first person with a master's. So like I'm in this territory that no one knows, and like the sky's the limit. And like my dad does really well. He's the president of a company. And so like I was always able to look up and say like, he had this amazing story, but I wanted an amazing story too. And that was the way that I was going to do it. So I think that it really helped me just decide that. And being around the Shine crew, I think is also a thing where they can tell me, like, we're always open about finances. We're always open about like what we make and everything. And when I jumped into like the new job and they were like, this is what you need to start charging and stuff, having those people around and pushing you and showing you like what you think is big isn't, like, you need this to level up, made such an incredible difference. I'm so happy for them, even though it would take me sometimes 5 years to get to where they were at. I mean, I'm not upset about it. I got there. So yeah.
So you got all these reps basically at working through tough situations and adversity and betting on yourself and winning. And you can't shortcut that. You can't read that in a book. You can't get that from a spreadsheet. That has to come from within. In my experience, I mean, getting to do this show and to talk, this is probably the 55th episode that I've done. It seems like that is the number one trait of people who eventually make it to however you want to define what success is, however they personally define it. I would say those who would consider themselves successful seem to have a little bit of grit and perseverance, and the hard things happen and then they figure out ways to solve it. And that gives them this energy and confidence that they can solve future things. And that's what you're describing here. It's hard. It's a shitty situation. That's horrible what you just described to me, and sexist and misogynist and all the bad words you want to use on it. But it allowed you to start betting on yourself and winning. And that's a snowball effect.
Yeah, absolutely. Resilience, I think, is one of the underappreciated skills out there. And I think it's something that you have to take the time to learn your craft and learn it well. And I think that every time I meet someone new kind of coming into their career and they want to kind of jump the ladder, and I'm like, you can, but do you want to be on that ladder and not be experienced and go through like years and years and years trying to catch up? Or do you want to like figure it out now and be able to be confident when you hit that level? I think that's different. And like one thing that I did when I first started my career, which is a little bit different than a lot of people, was everyone was telling me like, oh, you have so much experience, you should be charging a lot. And I knew that as a business, I needed to show that even though I worked with a bunch of startups and I had all these websites kind of behind my back, I needed that for my company. And so I had said, I'm going to go in, I'm going to do these like huge audits. When I say like, I mean, 100-page audits, videos, I still do them to this day, like hour-long videos going through everything and like lots of different spreadsheets and task lists and things. And I'm going to sell it for $2,000. And I want 30 logos. And when I get 30 logos, then I'll think about increasing the price. And like some people would say like, just do 5, like, you owe it to yourself, whatever. But it was like, no. And what ended up happening during that, kind of creating that and doing like $2,000 projects. Because of that, people started at $2,000. And the reason why I picked it was that's how much I knew as a manager I was allowed to charge without anyone really bothering me about it. And it was easy. And so when I went up to an investor and would say like, yeah, I do this audit, it's $2,000 is what it looks like. They're like, okay, I have like 5 companies. Can I do it? I'm like, yeah. And so I would get them all. And then they would be like, okay, let's start the projects. And so every company coming in might be 2,000, and people would like, balk at it, but they would turn into $10,000 clients. And my thing was $10,000 a year clients. Let's turn that into 20. How do we turn that into 30? How do we turn that into 100? That's where I was looking at it rather than that first entry level way of getting to me. And I still think of it that way. I've worked with 300 companies since on my own. And a lot of it was just going after meeting an investor and just saying, how many companies are in your portfolio? Let me do them. Let me just check them out and look under the hood. Because I literally think of myself more as a mechanic than anything else. Just let me look under it, tell you what's going on. And I would just, that one product, I would just, focus on first to be really, really, really good at it. And I think that was the thing that set me apart. And I learned a lot from that. And I learned also how to, because of those videos, I made 300 videos. I knew how to speak about SEO in a way that allowed me to then create a course for McMaster University, work at Grow Class and teach there, get all these opportunities to speak on stages about what I do. And so it gave me the reps I needed for the other skills that I also needed as an entrepreneur. So sometimes it feels like a lot of work and it doesn't whatever, but you got to think when you're looking at, the things that you're doing, what other skill is this actually helping? And is it worth the extra hour that it may take to do it? Sometimes it is for what you need to get to where you want to be. Absolutely.
Hey, if you're enjoying the stories on this show and feeling like you're ready to tackle some of your own hurdles, I'm here to help. If you didn't know already, I offer one-to-one coaching specifically for people who work on or around growth teams who want to have a bigger influence and impact in their roles. Maybe you're navigating some tough moments, whether it's managing your team or handling feedback. Maybe you just want to step into a bigger leadership role. Or maybe you're at a unicorn company today and you want to make sure that the company doesn't outgrow your skill set. Either way, I can help. If you're interested in learning a little bit more, head to deliveringvalue.co/coaching to learn a little bit more and set up a call with me to see if we jive. All right, enough from me. Back to the episode. Sometimes I think about working for yourself and picking up all these interesting skills, kind of like a video game. I'm not a video gamer, but it's just the best analogy for me, where you have to master a level before you're ready to get to the next level. Sometimes you get to the next level and there's stuff there that you couldn't have anticipated. Some stuff you like and it opens up new opportunities and new levels. Some stuff you don't like and you decide, hey, I'm going to go play something different. And that's kind of what you're describing, right? So you bet on yourself, you've got this vision, you start doing the thing, you pick up all these ancillary skills that open up all these other doors, and you get to decide which door to go through because you've got the skills and you're ready to play there. And that's great.
Yeah. And I promised myself that I would never, even though still, people will look at me and say why aren't you increasing your price? You could be you could have just one client and it could be this much money. And for me, that was never the plan, because for me, I wanted to make sure that I was never stuck. And so I'd rather work with a bunch of different companies, and I only want to be on my own. I have a couple of subcontractors I work with, but I want to be on my own. So there's certain things that I just wasn't going to change just to make more money because everyone else was doing. And it was really about, what is the business I want to build? What does it look like? And how I'm in the process of adoption. So, when my kid comes, am I going to be able to walk away? How have I built that into what I do? And just making sure my company will only work for me. It probably does, from the outskirts, people look at it going what are you doing? This doesn't make sense. But it makes sense for me. And I'm happy making what I do, and not feeling like any one client is more deserving than another, which is another part of how I wanted to create a business.
When I went on my own, I got great advice from Wes Bush. He works at productled.com. And he said, if you're going to work for yourself, make sure you fucking love the job, because there's going to be opportunities. And if you say yes to stuff you don't really want to do because the money's there, the opportunity feels like you should do it or you ought to do it, you're going to end up with a job that you don't like and nobody to blame but yourself. And so I wrote it down. I've been on my own 3.5 years, but I wrote it down when he told it to me. And I have to shake myself sometimes to remind myself that. And it sounds like you have a similar mantra, which is, I want to love working in my business. And that means I'm going to do it the way I want to do it and not the way someone else feels like I should do it.
Well, actually, 2 years ago, I started seeing the pull that everyone was doing fractional CMO work. And I went maybe that's what I should be doing. Maybe I need to promote myself after all these years of doing SEO and PPC. And I went in, started taking a course to kind of a mastermind to teach myself how to be one. And I'm going through it. And then in this, these chats that people are having, people are talking about their clients and this SEO problem that they have. And then I jump in and be oh no, this is what you got to do, blah, blah, blah. They're oh my God, thanks. So PVC problem. And I would jump in. And during that process, I realized, and they were giving me work to do, they were giving me clients to work with. And I was working with them and I was hating it. Like, I'm like, how, I don't want this. This is like having like a million jobs. Like, I don't want this, like, because SEO does never felt like work. It feels, it's so fun. I've always loved this when I was a kid. It was what I did when I was a kid. So like, this has always felt good. And this new job, it felt like a job. And I had like somehow gotten myself in a corner just because I thought that was what I was supposed to do. And so I went to the mastermind and said, like, guys, like, I'm out. I don't want to do this. I thought it was what I wanted, but it isn't. But if you need any more for SEO, I'm there. And I almost like got to jump back in with like a different love and appreciation for it, and being able to now speak about it a lot more. Like, I would talk on stages about kind of the imposter syndrome and kind of the stuff I was going through, like more emotional. But now I was willing to like make a podcast with a friend of mine about SEO. I never wanted to really talk about my hot takes or anything, but like now I felt like I had the confidence to do it. And so I think like, you know, you never know when those moments hit, but go through them, get through them and see how it feels. Cause like, you feel like you're just struggling. Like, what are we all doing here? And even like, I remember I was going to rename my company because I felt like that was the thing that you're supposed to do. You're supposed to rebrand and have this like catchy, nice name. And I remembered the reason why I have DaSilva Consulting, which is a really boring name, is because when I was a kid, I used to have my own consulting company, 7 years old, and I would have on the letterhead that I made, it said DaSilva Consulting. And my mom said like, oh, Tiff, like, we're not the type of people that have our names on the door. Like, come on. And I was like, in my head, I always said like, well, I want that. And so I don't want to let it go. And I think like sometimes things may feel like it's the right thing to do because everyone else is doing, but if you can be true to who you are, and even though it looks like a really ultra professional, weird kind of name, it's actually not. It's like about me and my 7-year-old self, just like, so I think it's really important to listen to yourself.
There's a book I just read called The Big Leap. Have you read it? It's by Gay Hendricks. It's got, I've probably mentioned on a few of these, it's got a picture of like a fishbowl with a little fish in it, and then like a bigger fishbowl with like a fish jumping from one fishbowl to the other. And in it, it talks about this journey that you just reflected on, which is there's many things that I could do. Some things feel like play. Some things feel like work. Some of the things that feel like work, I might get paid a ton of money for. And how do I break through to the next level of success? And in the book, they advocate for finding the thing that feels like play and finding the courage to say no to the thing that might even make you a lot of money, that like you're known for, that you're good at, to optimize the thing that feels like play, because that should unlock more success in the long run. And that's hard to do. Like, right, it's easy to read, but it's hard to do. And that's what you just talked us through.
Yeah, and I doubled my income by doing it, like double. Yeah. So it's possible.
Hell yeah. All right. So shifting gears a little bit, one of my observations, getting to know you over the last hour or so, is you seem insanely confident, right? The way that you speak about your experiences and your thoughts and your beliefs and the things that you're willing to say no to, and even your reflections on some of these tough moments in your life, I would guess that someone in your shoes probably feels confident all the time. So I know that that's not true because you've alluded to a few of these tough moments along the way. Can you share a time where you've struggled with anxiety or imposter syndrome, and how that manifests in your life and how you work through those moments?
I mean, I think just going through the unicorn startup was the first time when I started to really pinpoint the fact that, you know, this is something that I was feeling. And I think one of the things that happened, and this is like my crazy breakup story with them, was I hadn't slept for 4 days and I was out of my mind.
Oh, I know what that feels like. I got a 7-month-old who's not sleeping for very different reasons. I'm close to that.
You know, that kind of like you get crazy, like you start thinking crazy thoughts. And so I decided to write a draft email where I would just kind of like let all my thoughts out. I kind of decided that, and I need to quit, but I just needed to be able to just fall asleep that day. That was like the only thing I really cared about. And it was like 3 o'clock in the morning, which always tells me only bad things can happen between 2 and 4. And so I decide I'm just going to write a draft email of my thoughts, and then tomorrow morning I will kind of relook at it, assess it, and then send it. So I go and I write it, and it's the best. It is like I feel like this, I didn't have a team, I didn't do this, blah, blah, blah. And I let it all out. And the next day I wake up and I'm like, oh, thank God I didn't send that email. And I go through looking for the draft. It's not there. Look at the sent and realize I had sent out this.
Oh no.
Yeah.
At 3 a.m.
At 3 a.m. And basically saying I quit. And then I look in my inbox, and I've never been so scared to, click on something. My manager, all he wrote was, okay. And that was it. And it was over. And I remember just being like, wow, it's over and that's it. And I remember feeling this like, I definitely don't feel good enough. I'm kind of stuck here. I don't know how to go to the next place now feeling this way. I don't know how I'll ever do this job again. Do I need to pivot? I think there's this feeling like I need to pivot. I need to find a new job. I can't be in this space again because my confidence is gone. And I would just suggest that you look somewhere else for that. If it's therapy, if it's for me, I found this amazing mindfulness coach who just taught me how to like breath work and, how to getting outside of my anxiety. Because even thinking about doing digital marketing, I couldn't imagine doing it again. And which sucks because again, I love SEO. Like I think it's so fun. And I think it's so cool to be able to go through that journey with a client. I couldn't imagine not having it. But I was thinking like, do I become a dog walker? Do I become this? And
I always talk to people who, everybody that I talk to is like, the coffee shop. I got to do the coffee shop. It's like, everyone's got one of those.
Yeah. And it's like, is this my future? But I knew that like, I had to do this. And so she helped me really start building the foundation to not only be able to know what to do in those moments of anxiety. And it still happens. It's not like it's gone away forever, but learning how to meditate, even if it's only for a little bit, or learning things that put you in a meditative state. Like certain music puts me in that like nice space, maybe taking a walk, playing with my dogs, and also getting my reps in terms of how I speak about SEO. There's so many times where in the shower, I would be like pretending I was talking to client, arguing back in those moments that I had. Wish I could redo those moments and exactly how I would do it. And also talking that through and almost like I have a friend of mine who will always play like devil's advocate or be that person. If I need to just like rage, if I didn't get to rage, I want to rage at you. And having those people that are there that are like, yeah, let's get through this so that, you're not thinking about this anymore. And I think finding ways to not go around it, not go under it, but like get through it is really important. If that requires you having to say it out loud to a therapist, if that requires a friend that you can go back and forth and just say like, can you pretend you're the client? And just so I can just get this out. It seems like it shouldn't help, but it does. And for me also, some of my therapy was going up on stage and telling that story to people all over the world. And there's some countries where they were just like, it did not match the culture. Like Romania did not understand what I was putting out. But it was being able to say that story to different audiences, to tell people that it's okay to feel this way, that you can get through it, that you could be this other person on the other end, that you could actually not only be that person, but also feel confident enough to stay up on stage and tell the story to a bunch of people. And also, these are the different things I put into place, whether it was getting the Shine crew, whether it was meditating, whether it was writing. I remember writing all the things I thought of myself. When I walked in the first day for the mindfulness clinic, I walked in and she asked me, what do you like about yourself? And I was at such a low point. I put nothing, absolutely nothing. And she goes, okay, it's just like this lovely little woman from Switzerland. She's like, okay, well, we're going to have to work on that. And she's like, I want you to write down then everything you don't like about yourself. And so I wrote it all down. And then she goes, okay, now that we have the list, I want you to write what the opposite of that would look like. And so I had to write that list. And she goes, now.
That was a good way to get there.
Yeah. And she goes, I want you to memorize. If this, then say this. If this, then say this. And so I used to keep it up because at that point, I could not control my thoughts. And that's part of anxiety. I could not control it. And so I had that. And so now there's certain ones that if I tried to make that connection, it wouldn't work. And I knew I had to work on those specific things and make whatever I need to up level, whatever skill I need to get to make that happen. I needed to do that. There are others that were easy. I realized I just needed kind of to rewrite that in my brain. And so I spent the next few years just like working on the stuff that I couldn't necessarily believe when I said it out loud. And out came a more confident person and someone who realized that for me, being in-house was more risky to my mental health, to my overall physical health, to just my career than it was to start a new business, which to others may seem really risky. And I knew that I was meant to do that. And some people may find the opposite, but I think it's really important in those moments to think like, am I actually in an environment? Because I was always going to be people pleasing. I was always going to care too much what my manager said. And I was always going to let them stifle me because I wanted to move ahead. I wanted to do cooler things. And now I can do that with my clients and say like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we like put a couple $1,000s into this thing? And they're like, and they can say no. But a lot of the times they're just so excited. They're like, yeah, let's do it. And I could do that. Whereas I couldn't do that in-house and I couldn't learn new things like I could. So I think that really helped me kind of get to that next level and be this person. And also telling myself that if I could help anyone else who's going through that, to do whatever I could. So I mentor like crazy and teach like crazy. And that's always a part of half of what I do, so that I kind of always remember what it's like to be in that world, so that I know that even when I'm feeling like off, or a negotiation doesn't go the way I want, or my ego's been hurt, I'm able to listen to some of my mentees, and they help me through it, just like I might be helping them through it.
Yeah, you get it from both sides. Did you keep the piece of paper?
No, I didn't. I didn't. No, but I
I wasn't
actually,
sure if it had turned into some ultimate affirmation sticky note.
you know what? That's a lie, because I did have a picture. I don't have the actual note, but I did have a picture of it that I used to show up on when I used to do the talks. So they did see the image, and I would show it to all. And like some of them were not pretty. Some of them had to do with like my body image or whatever. But sometimes it's everything. Everything just doesn't feel right. And so many things have to do with, your career, your personal life. So yeah, so I do have it somewhere. But for me, now, I mean, towards the end, we had to burn it, which I ended up doing. But for me now, I can look at that and it doesn't even feel like I could probably have another list that looks different, but I'd never been back to where I was.
Yeah. No. I asked if you saved it mostly to reflect on how far you've come and evolved and changed. Obviously, there's always going to be a list, right? That things change, we change, our internal thoughts and beliefs change, but to reflect on the progress.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. But it's cool so you can think about.
Yeah. Okay. So what do you do today as we start to wrap here? If you're having a bad day now, or you're revving too high, or you're just feeling like you're not showing up as your best self, how do you reset today?
I used to live near the water, near the ocean. So for me, water always does it. So it's like either I take a shower just to get me from one mode to another. So when I leave the shower, I'm like a different person. Or I'm big on, I sound like a wellness person. Like ice fudges have been.
Oh, I love that. No, I'm game for that.
There's like a certain one that I go to here in Toronto where you could just like stream. Like they have this one vocal release part right when you're in the sauna, right before you do an ice plunge. And I found for me, like, that is one of those areas where it's just like by doing that, I feel like a million times better when I walk out. And so that's definitely been part of my kind of journey to figure out what are those little things that you can do that just snaps you out of it. Meditation doesn't work sometimes. When you're up here, you need something that's going to like almost shock the system to get you out of it. So like the things that used to work, the meditation, the walking around stuff, that doesn't work anymore. But I kind of, water has helped a lot.
Right. And you change. Yeah. What's interesting about cold plunge, it's like a good metaphor for life, because the first 20 seconds, I do a lot of cold plunges as well. The first 20 seconds, you're like, oh, this is it. My life is over. I can't breathe. I got to run out of here. And then if you can just make it through the 20 seconds, all of a sudden your body and the muscles kind of relax. And you're like, all right, there's a few places in my body that sort of hurt, but I feel incredible. And then you get out of there and you're like, however long you make it, if you try to break your record, or even if you just survive and it's a small amount of time, you feel so accomplished, like you just worked through this insane thing. And it just makes everything else seem easier because you just bet on yourself and you won and you did the really hard thing in spite of it being hard. And I find that really addictive. And that applies in many areas of life, like whether you get feedback or anxiety. When you do the thing and you find ways to work through it, you get taller, you get bigger.
Absolutely. And it's hard every time. That's what I love with art. Like, and every time you go in, it's not like, oh, I did it yesterday, it's fine. You might have like just your mind is so interesting where it's like suddenly like you saw ice cubes in it and you're like, oh my God, I can't do it with ice cubes. Or like you get in there and you realize it is like 4 degrees colder than it usually is. And suddenly your whole mind just kind of goes like a little bit crazy. So I love that about it because it is so different. There's some of them that we do that where we have to jump into like 10 seconds in every tub. And so you have to go into like 20 different tubs. And like that is just because some of them are colder than others.
Right, colder than others.
Yeah,
sure,
so kind of going through that with people just hyping you up and like everyone's kind of yelling and stuff. I think like those are those days when things are like really hard and you just need a bunch of people around you. It's so cool to put yourself in these places where you have just a bunch of people that are going after the same goal. And I'm not like a sports person, so I never really was into that, but this is my way of kind of getting that in that way. And also finding those things that also calm you down, because that's like a way to like hype you up. But I felt like almost dumb when I was like looking last year for like a bunch of book clubs, because I just wanted to be part of a book club. I read 60 books a year. I wanted to be around people when I do it. And so I became part of like 3 different book clubs. And like that has been such a cool journey too, because it's like, it's more of a calming thing. You do it once a month and it's like, you kind of have a little bit of a pressure to kind of get things done. And it's something that outside of work that like I have to stop everything and I got to do this thing right now. So I've really liked that kind of putting pressure on me in a different way.
As we start to wrap here, what haven't you shared that you want listeners to the show and to your story to take away that you haven't had a chance to say yet?
Every journey is different, but your gut throughout it all is going to tell you if you're in the right place or the wrong place, and really listen to it. It doesn't matter if you're in your dream job. It doesn't matter, if you think you're supposed to be doing this thing, your gut is ultimately going to tell you. And I can tell you as someone who almost who literally flatlined for just doing the right thing and, making sure that my resume looks okay, it's not worth it. And it's so, like I said before, it is so much better on the other side of it. And I'm sure that you could do amazing things, even if it's not in the dream package that you thought it was.
For folks who want to learn more about you and connect with you and maybe learn what you're doing for work and work with you, where should we send them?
So LinkedIn, Tiffany DaSilva, also at tiffanydasilva.com, and the Tiff DaSilva on Instagram.
Oh, cool. All right. We'll put links to all that stuff in the show notes. Thank you for coming on and sharing your story.
Thanks so much.